Welcome to the first ever installment of the Matchy Chapter podcast. This month we read Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I am so excited to get this podcast up and running. My name is Sav, I am your host, and I am joined on this episode and every episode by my beautiful sister Tam.
Hello.
We do things a little bit differently around here, and we like to discuss how our month was while we read the book. So I'm going to kick things off right there. Tam, how was your month?
Very cruisy, very lazy, lots of downtime, lots of reading time, which was really good. I was really excited to read this type of genre. I've never really read a romance, contemporary romance before.
Yeah. So this is your first romance?
Yeah, and my first Emily Henry book.
I have had it on my TBR for the longest time, so I'm really happy we got to pick it up and read it. Emily is an American author and she has a bunch of New York Times best-selling novels. I feel like you cannot scroll BookTok for very long without running into one of her books that is highly, highly recommended from all of the BookTok creators. Let's get straight into things. What were your first thoughts on this book?
As I said, I'm not the biggest contemporary romance fan, so I don't read a lot of it. So my first thought was that it was kind of boring me a little bit, but I don't know if that's just because I don't often read them, and could be how they all are. But I loved that we instantly got to know who the characters were.
Yeah.
We got a feel for their personalities. Like it was this little bit, is it's going to be like the grumpy sunshine trope? Yeah, I really loved it. It was just, straight into it.
Yeah, from the minute I opened the first page and started to learn about Alice and the two journalists, and I was like, we are entering enemies to lovers territory, and I'm really, really excited. I feel like we learnt a lot about the characters quite quickly. Should we get straight into who your favourite was?
I don't know if I can pick a favourite. So I liked both of them. Like they knew who they were. And they're already established in their jobs. They're confident. They're both like over 30.
Yeah, they're older. They're 33. I loved that. Yep.
I'm tired of these 18-year-olds, falling in love and like you don't know what love is at 18.
I know, because as unrelatable as some romances can be, like when you throw in that they're 18, it's like, well, this is never going to happen because
it's unrelatable. But yeah, I loved Alice is extroverted and bubbly, and she has a positive outlook on everything, but not in a naive way.
Yeah.
And then Hayden is just this he comes across cold and disheartened, but he's like confident and like mysterious and really wise.
Written by a woman.
Yeah. Classic men written by a woman.
Yeah.
So he's like perfect blend of masculine but emotional at the same time.
He was so wise. I totally agree. What do you think of Margaret?
I think having Margaret's story as like the second plot or the subplot was also really in depth. Like I think again, it's someone who knows her backstory. She knows who she is. She knows her history. So it was really good to a good way of tying both stories together. Having the two writers, it's like discovering their own story whilst we're hearing an already happened story and already happened history. I thought it was really clever.
What about Cecil?
Cecil? Who is Cecil? He was it was almost like at the start you just kept thinking, who is he? Why is he here? What is it? Something's going on with this guy. Who it was really, you didn't really get to know him as a person, but he was just always there. And the same with Jodie. Margaret's in-house keeper or whatever we thought.
If I'm being completely honest, I still don't know where Jodie stands or why she was there. Was she a niece? Or
She ends up being a niece.
Yeah, I missed that whole section, to be honest.
So you do get who they are, you get to know who they are at the end, but you still don't get to know them as a character. They're just there. So
the characters are quite layered. We just mentioned that. And we also mentioned that there was quite a few, two plots kind of intertwined within one another throughout this whole story. And throughout my research of Emily as an author, I found that she's known for these layered plots.
Yeah, okay.
Which we probably would know if we've read an Emily Henry before.
Paid more attention.
Yeah. But it's true. You have this great story of these two journalists, and then you have the story of Margaret Ives on top of this. And in an interview about the book, when asked about these two overlapping plot lines, Emily said this: It's got these two different plot lines that are running alongside each other. But the real story to me is sort of this third rail. That's the way that the two stories interact. And the idea being that neither of them is complete without the other story. They both are braided together to tell this other story that you don't really know what that is until the end of the book.
Okay. Yes, I do. I felt that. There was always that thing in the back of my head that Hayden and Alice are having their own Margaret Ives story, and that's how they sort of linked together. I do, yes.
I found that as well. I just found everything incredibly intentional. I found that I was ready for a connection between Alice and Margaret, Alice's mum and Margaret, Hayden and Margaret in some way. And not to jump ahead, but when we talk about our predictions, I hit the nail on the head and I got, I think it was chapter 9, and I was like, is Hayden the grandson? And
bingo,
he was the grandson. Both plots that ran through this book were very cemented in grief. Alice with the loss of her father, and we've also got Margaret with her decades of tragedy. And I found it quite interesting reading a romance novel but having so many reminders of grief. In the same interview, Emily actually spoke on this, and it was incredibly intentional, of course. She said, "I generally find it hard to write a love story where you don't deal with a little bit of grief, partly because I think when you're getting close to someone, that is just part of the process. You do this sort of personal excavation where you're sharing the things that matter the most to you and that hurt you the most and that you treasure the most. And then partly because I just do think that grief is the flip side of love. You really cannot love without grief or grieve without love."
Whoa, that's deep.
Very beautiful.
I definitely, when reading this, did not go that deep into the book. I felt reading it like everything was just laid out on the page for you. I didn't delve into like the hidden meanings or the read between the lines type.
The contrast of grief and love. Like when you have two contrasting colours, it made one another pop. So if you have the grief storyline with both of their lives, you can then appreciate and really see the love.
Yeah.
Because I didn't find that Hayden and Alice's relationship moved too quickly. I just felt it was quite natural and quite beautiful.
But all that's what it just felt like it was just happening.
Yeah.
And here's me just like, where's the spice?
There was some spice. Spice check. It's definitely like half a chili. Like, if we're even on the scale.
Is this what you call a closed door romance?
It also had some great points about legacy and the good and the bad that gets passed down throughout the generations. And I found this quite interesting because we don't often look at our parents. There's like a great quote that goes around TikTok that it's like a reminder your mum is living life for the first time too. And we often don't look at the generations that have come before us and really know the intricate details of how they lived their life. Like, how did they interact with their friends? How did they interact with previous partners? Like, we don't know those questions. So I think it was very insightful to have so much detail from Margaret's life.
Yeah.
And I think we would have those details if we were like an heiress to a millionaire
family. Yeah, agreed. And or like, you know, the diaries of your great-great-grandfather was something that were handed down through generations.
Yeah, so I found that quite remarkable to have that information about Margaret's history. And I think it would have been a really interesting story if I knew who in the end I got to write it.
Got to write it. Yeah, we never find that out. We never find out what happened to the story. I pictured it like that obviously as we were reading it, we were getting to know the story and that they were writing it as we were reading the book, which made sense. But then at the end, Alice just decides to write her own story and we never get like a closing of Margaret's.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to Hayden and how Emily portrays him as really dark and mysterious, but also really wise. So he says in, I think it was a chapter 20, when him and Alice are having one of their debriefs, I think it's after one of them works with Margaret, and he's pointing out that she's a bit mopey, and they're talking about how people care. And she says, well, yeah, of course they care when you win a Pulitzer Prize. And he says from the book, no, not then, because then suddenly they're incredibly proud, but they're proud of the accomplishment, not of the work. So if you feel like you have to keep accomplishing instead of just creating, it affirms the idea that the value in what you do is how people react to it and not just in the making of it. And I think relating that to real life and how your family, like how you're raised and how you, like, you know, it's passed down from generation to generation. I think that's so deep in itself.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly, like, she's nailed humanity on the head.
I know.
Like, that's exactly what people do, and why we do the things we do is because of the accomplishment, not necessarily because we enjoy the work or are proud of ourselves for the work.
Absolutely. And this is why I think she's become one of my favorite authors, because she's taken a section of the human condition that's not really spoken about.
I think that sets a theme throughout the whole book. She continuously, instead of, like, normally when you read a book, you have character development and character growth, but these characters
were right there
and already so wise and knew exactly what they were talking about and what they were doing, and that's what I love.
One thing we do differently on this podcast is midway guesses, because I am someone that I feel like I can guess the end of a book when I'm midway through. So I wanted to introduce that idea to the podcast. So I got you, Tamika, to write down your midway guess. What was it? And we'll see if you got it right.
Okay. So I did not get it right. At 53%, I had no idea what to think about what's happening again, because it was all just laid out in front of you.
Taking
and I was like, this is like I'm definitely a vibes reader. I was like, these are good vibes. I'm enjoying this book. I was really hoping for some really big twist, like, you know, I'm glad he didn't, but like Hayden passing away or something like that. But it was not, the book just did not give me anything to think that at all. The only sort of guess that I put out there was that Hayden and Alice had their own Margaret Ives story and their own, like, happily ever after sort of thing.
What do you mean by that?
So Margaret experiencing the wild relationship that she did with Cosmo, I thought that Hayden and Alice would go through a wild relationship.
Yeah.
It did not, for real.
Well, big cha-ching
Fail.
for me, because I think, like I said, it was chapter 9 and I wrote down, is Hayden the grandson?
Yeah, bang on.
Bang on,
What?
which I'm really proud of. So we're going to go 1 for 1 on my midway guess score.
Yep, you are up there.
I did also think it would be a grander twist. Like, as I kept reading, I thought the Hayden being the grandson was just way too obvious. There's got to be a bigger twist here.
Yeah, I think that's what was on the line as well. Like, there just needed to be this big, like, build-up of something.
Yeah,
you know?
because there was so much tension.
Yeah. What I felt too, though, is what happened with Cecil and Jodie. Like, all those side characters, there was no tying of those side characters.
Yeah, getting into what we thought of the ending, I did think we would have a lot more information on those loose ends that we just didn't get. Where did Cecil go? Where did Jodie go? Who got the story in the end?
Yeah.
They were all a little bit grey. I'm pretty sure it was mentioned, but I can't remember. It didn't stick out to me.
Didn't stick out. It wasn't that revelation of, that's who they are. Like, I know why Cecil's there. I know why he's on the island, but it just doesn't. He's just not finished.
Yeah, I did feel that with the ending as well. Yeah. Did the ending remind you of any movies Any popular movies, particular
90s rom-com.
90s rom-com, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
No.
Sweet Home Alabama. They're the two I'm referencing.
Yes, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Right?
With Matthew McConaughey
when
and
he
Kate Hudson.
pulls her over on the taxi and he's like, is this true?
That's
and
right.
She's like, I meant every word. I was like, that is
Nailed
how
it.
to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. And also the fact that he rocked up at the house while she was at her mother's house or the family home. It reminded me of Sweet Home Alabama when Jake rocks up to the home.
Yeah.
I love those two movies. They are some of my favorite movies of all time. So I just really enjoyed. I was just loving, like, riding through the ending. I think all my expectations were met. And I was just enjoying the vibes of the ending.
Yeah.
Probably how you were enjoying the vibes of the whole story.
Just vibing along. It was good. I will read you my favorite quote, okay, in the whole book.
Please do.
He goes, it's yours, he offers. I laugh. Oh, I can have the world? Mine, he says. Yeah, you can have mine.
Yes, that was so
Sweet.
cute. I thought we could play a little game of Would You Rather because we were faced with a few moral dilemmas, for example, mixing business with pleasure, huge one. Mm-hmm. So I have a few questions for you and I want you to tell me what you would rather do. Would you rather pursue a career opportunity that forces you to betray someone's trust or turn down the chance and live with the regret of not fulfilling your professional ambition?
The second one.
So you
The
wouldn't
latter.
betray
I
someone's
would
trust?
I would turn down the opportunity to pursue ambition if it meant keeping someone's trust and keeping a relationship with someone.
Admirable. I think I would have to be put in this situation because...
Oh, come on.
Would you rather discover that someone you love is related to someone you are writing about, so Hayden related to Margaret?
Okay, yeah.
Or never find that out and keep your relationship separate from your personal life? So basically, if Alice just went in with an open mind and didn't do any digging.
No, I think I would rather know the first one. I think I would rather know because that's part of his history. That's part of who Hayden is as a person. And when you're in a relationship with someone, you want to know who they are and their history.
I feel like you would find out eventually, especially in relation to the book. Like Nicolette is such a unique name. You're going to know that was
like
your mum's
it's going to
name.
come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I think that brings us to the end of what our thoughts were.
This great, big, beautiful life.
Give me your great, big, beautiful rating.
Okay, so again, loved the vibes. Not a romance reader. Overall, the book just gave nice. It was just a nice book.
Sugary.
Yeah. So I rated it 3.5 stars.
I'm the same. I rated 3.5 as well.
Oh, there you go.
Only because I'm keeping my comparison of like 5-star is fourth wing level. And it's really hard for me to rate. I rate most romances around a 3. So this just had that cherry on top with the phenomenal characters.
Yeah.
So that's where my 0.5 comes from. But yeah, 3.5.
Love it.
Should we pick the next month's book?
Yes, let's do it.
Give it a good toss. What are we reading?
Okay, we are reading House We Grew Up In by Lisa Jewell.
Oh, a thriller.
Yay.
I'm so excited for that. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us on our first ever episode of the Matchy Chapter. If you would like to read along with us next month, we will be reading The House We Grew Up In by Lisa Jewell. That's it from us this month, and we are ready to close the book. Bye, guys.
See you later.
The Birds seemed to be the perfect family. Mother, father, 4 children, a picture-book cottage in the country. But one Easter weekend, something happens. Something so unexpected, so devastating that no one can bring themselves to talk about it. The family shatters, seemingly for good. Until years later, they are forced to return to the house they grew up in and to confront what really broke the family apart. Hey guys, before you pick up The House We Grew Up In by Lisa Jewell, please be aware that there is a content warning around suicide on this book. Please be aware of that before you purchase it. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next episode.